Tonight, we check in with the poor man's Greg Gutfeld, George Clooney. Remember, he wrote a scathing op-ed prior to the election calling on Joe Biden to drop out. And this week, he took to CNN, the only place he's seen less than in his own movies, to gloat. God, I hope God, I hope Big Tapper doesn't plant his lips firmly on George's puckered ass.
George Clooney thought he could effortlessly slide into politics with a smug grin and an espresso in hand, but Greg Gutfeld and Megyn Kelly teamed up to deliver a savage verbal takedown that felt more like WrestleMania for washed-up celebrities. One minute he was preaching from his mansion, the next he was being slammed back to Lake Como with ruthless precision. What did he say that triggered such a brutal response? Stick around, because Hollywood arrogance just met its match, and Clooney didn't see it coming.
George, are the Hollywood roles getting a little hard to come by as you age and get decidedly more smug and self-congratulatory? I'm just asking. And chooses to finish this show by lecturing the audience on how journalism ought to be done. Speaking as R. Murrow, he warns about the ongoing struggle for truth and integrity in the media. Truth and integrity, about the potential for the media to be manipulated. And
George Clooney must have looked around at the nation. Chaos everywhere, inflation soaring, and people fighting over gas prices like it's the Great Depression, and thought, what this country really needs is more lectures from billionaires. Because nothing screams unity quite like a man in a $20,000 tuxedo, sipping espresso in Lake Como, telling everyday Americans how to vote while his gardener trims the hedges in the background.
It was a civic duty. When I see people on my side of the street not telling the truth, I thought that was time.
Are people still mad at you for that?
Some people, sure.
Wow, if that's Clooney with makeup, imagine what he looks like without it, huh?
When the guy who once wore the Batman cape and nearly doomed the franchise tells America it's time to reflect, you're supposed to listen. At least, that's what his PR team hoped. Instead, it turned into a spectacular slow-motion disaster of elite arrogance, met head-on with ruthless sarcasm from Greg Gutfeld and a precise intellectual knockout from Megyn Kelly.
she and George get together and they start navel-gazing on stage about themselves, of course, and their vaunted profession and how bad, how just terrible the media is, and had the false change.
What we do in this is we talk about the responsibility of journalists to hold truth out, right? That's our goal. And so if you do that, and we don't tell people what to think when we show that.
George Clooney probably pictured himself as a modern-day philosopher, his voice soaring over patriotic music, inspiring a wave of change. But the reality was far from that. Greg Gutfeld laughed so hard it was almost a workout, while Megyn Kelly tore apart his moral stance with the precision of a surgeon armed with a jackhammer.
Clooney's the same guy who held a star-studded fundraiser for Joe weeks before he dropped out and only called for him to quit after his disastrous debate. Clooney ignored concerns over Biden's age for years, only to magically come to the conclusion that he was demented when America finally saw what Clooney had been hiding. That's the problem with Dems. They're immediate shills for awful people, then pretend otherwise voters see that they're full of. But remember, we were pointing out Joe's dementia before it was cool. We knew Biden was the president ever, which probably means Jimmy Carter died a happy man.
Greg Gutfeld, naturally, watched Clooney's performance with all the respect of a cat observing a goldfish lecture it about the water cycle. Clooney's statements were like a high-calorie, low-nutrition snack of political rhetoric, filled with fancy words but completely lacking logic. Gutfeld tore into it like it was a bloated Oscars speech that went on 30 minutes too long. To him, Clooney's hypocrisy wasn't just clear, it was practically an art form. Imagine jetting halfway across the globe in a carbon-spewing private plane to lecture on climate change, all while acting like owning a vineyard somehow qualifies you to comment on global affairs. In Gutfeld's eyes, Clooney perfectly embodies the Malibu Messiah complex, a rare condition where celebrities mistake applause for expertise. He didn't need to dive into policy. He simply painted the picture of a man who spends more time moisturizing than most politicians spend studying legislation, suddenly deciding he's the oracle of modern democracy.
Breaking. Tara Palmieri, who's got her own stack and podcast now, she's been on the show, she got a copy and released a couple of the nuggets, and so did Guardian. But hers was a really interesting nugget. And she's apparently in this book, they reveal that George Clooney saw Morning Joe one day, right after his op-ed, and Nika Brzezinski was suggesting that Barack Obama was behind the George Clooney ad. That was basically making Clooney seem like Obama's puppet.
Here's the heart of it. Greg Gutfeld, in his own words, though never quoting directly, painted Clooney as that guy at a dinner party who hasn't cracked open a book since 1998, but still insists on lecturing everyone about how the government should run. The takedown was both savage and hilarious. Gutfeld likened Clooney's attempt to fix serious issues to trying to stop a leaky pipe with a bottle of cologne. Nice smell, 0 results. He said Clooney's grasp of middle America was about as accurate as a Yelp review from someone who's never stepped outside Beverly Hills.
I bet there's one person in particular he thinks is spectacular.
There's one person in particular I think is spectacular. There are a few who I think is levitating above that is Wes Moore. I like him a lot. I think he could be someone we could all join in behind. We have to find somebody rather soon. It's our job now to put together a proper team to stand up because we're right now polling very poorly.
I love that. Levitating above, as opposed to sitting at the bottom, like his last.
And in classic roast fashion, Gutfeld didn't miss a chance to remind us Clooney once starred in a movie co-starring a talking goat. If that's not foreign policy expertise, what is? While Gutfeld wielded sarcasm like a flamethrower, Megyn Kelly assembled a surgical strike of logic, facts, and reality checks. Where Gutfeld brought the laughs, Kelly brought the courtroom drama, delivering a closing argument worthy of prime time. A champion for equality, living in a fortress guarded like a royal palace? Absolutely. She didn't just call out hypocrisy, she spotlighted it like a Broadway production. According to Kelly, Clooney doesn't just miss the point, he is the point. A living billboard for how out of touch Hollywood elites have become.
Going on, this is to 60 last night, about, you mentioned his op-ed in the New York Times on Joe Biden and why he did it. Such a selfless, brave act, Ben. Here he was.
I was raised to tell the truth. I had seen the president up close for this fundraiser, and I was surprised. And so I feel as if there was a lot of profiles of artists in my party through all of it.
Oh, wow.
And I was not proud of that. And I also believe I had to tell the truth.
That fundraiser where he saw Biden falling off the stage, where Obama came out to grab him, was June 15th. The debate was June 27th. It wasn't until July 10th, a month after he attended the fundraiser with him, that George finally wrote that op-ed after it became clear that Joe Biden wasn't stepping down.
It's not that his opinions are new. They're recycled talking points dipped in caviar and served with a side of moral superiority. Kelly targeted the deeper issue, the illusion that fame equals wisdom. Just because someone's face is famous doesn't mean their opinions carry more weight than a raccoon's Twitter feed. She questioned why networks keep handing Clooney the microphone on democracy as if he wrote the Constitution between espresso sips. But the most devastating part of Kelly's takedown was her refusal to be dazzled. Where others hear violins when Clooney speaks, Kelly sees a PR machine selling reheated celebrity fluff disguised as statesmanship. She saw the script, the costume, and wasn't buying a second of the act.
In this new world of common sense, what does he align with? He might have way more in common with Trump than he is with the progressives. The question is, does he have the bravery to say that? I have no idea where he stands on the border, sanctuary cities, or trans extremism. How does he feel about the fires in LA? Is he happy with how it was handled by Mayor what's-her-face and Governor who's his name? You know.
While Clooney floated high on his self-made cloud of sophistication, Megyn Kelly stayed grounded, wielding her scalpel of truth with precision. She didn't attack him personally. She dismantled the whole myth of Clooney as a savior, that odd belief that charisma and a sharp jawline somehow qualify someone to solve global chaos. And the best part? The public devoured it like popcorn at a blockbuster. Gutfeld's sharp jabs went viral instantly. Memes of Clooney photoshopped onto motivational posters with captions like, "Speak less, flex less," exploded across social media. Twitter became a battleground, with Clooney defenders clutching cappuccino cups and critics swinging hammers of common sense. Meanwhile, Kelly's takedown was clipped, quoted, and replayed on every show brave enough to challenge celebrity authority. Her words weren't just commentary, they were a spotlight that made people stop scrolling and say, "Finally, someone said it." Megyn didn't storm the room swinging. She walked in like a calm surgeon, rolling up her sleeves with a silent, "Oh, George, you really want to do this?" While Greg Gutfeld had already body-slammed Clooney into the punchline graveyard, Megyn pulled out her intellectual scalpel, carving the actor's argument into neat, bite-sized pieces of pure embarrassment.
Who outed herself not only as a leftist, which we knew, but as somebody who, and by the way, she's also a husband stealer. She stole the husband she has right now in a reported affairs. Okay, maybe don't be the voice of the ad in which we talk about women betraying their husbands, because in the leftist view, marriages are not about honesty and talking about one's differences and agreeing to disagree on certain dicey issues, but they're about lying. And they believe this so strongly, they put it in an ad. And her pal, George Clooney, who did something similar for another ad, same. You got Joe Biden out. How'd it work out for you? How'd that go? Maybe you should have said something a little...
On her podcast, where sharp becomes wrapped in rock-solid facts, Megyn Kelly took Clooney's political ramblings, held him up like a suspicious piece of meat, and proceeded to fact-check the espresso right out of him. Let me be clear. She started with that trademark lawyer meets glacier tone. You really think you're defending democracy from a heated infinity pool in Lake Como, with your Wi-Fi broadcasting pure superiority? Then she went straight for the jugular. Clooney's claims about media misinformation, threats to democracy, and his recycled take that conservative voices are dangerous? Megyn had the receipts.
He waited a long time, but he should have the guts to maybe say that his friends in Hollywood, like John Voight or Mel Gibson or Sylvester Stallone, who shared a risk, might have been right on a few things. He's saying Glengarry Glen Ross, am I right?
No, it's good night and good luck.
Oh,
Sorry,
never mind.
my fault.
I was going to say, I mean, they have tremendous respect for David Mamet. David Mamet is one of the most conservative people. So maybe instead of just sitting in silence, you actually speak up for some of the people who shared the risk.
She brought up stats showing trust in mainstream media plummeting faster than Clooney's last box office hit, and reminded listeners that silencing dissent isn't democracy. It's just an echo chamber with better lighting. And then came that look, that unmistakable, "Are you serious?" expression Kelly flashes when someone stumbles into a debate armed with good intentions but zero logic. But wait, it only got sharper. Enter the hypocrisy highlight reel. Megyn Kelly, with surgical precision, called out George Clooney for preaching climate change while jet-setting on private planes. So often, they probably qualify for frequent flyer counseling. She didn't stop there. Kelly exposed how he champions unity in speeches, but only if that unity excludes conservatives, libertarians, truckers, or anyone without a subscription to The Atlantic and a resistance badge to match his endless monologues about democracy.
I think, this Johnny-come-lately, I was raised to be honest, is a bunch of BS, all right? Obama told him to do it. He sees himself as this extremely important person. I think he's an arrogant, condescending, smug individual who thinks that, he should be able to tell people in America, and the Democrat Party certainly, what they should and shouldn't do. This president, Joe Biden, is one of the most disastrous presidents that we've had in American history.
Conveniently, his passion for democracy kicks in only when his political side is in the driver's seat. As Megyn summed it up, it's democracy when they win, fascism when they don't. Apparently, ballots only count if George Clooney approves a result. Ouch! Somewhere in Italy, a cappuccino curdled on its own. But Kelly wasn't just there to roast. She came to dismantle. And there it was, the final blow to Clooney's carefully crafted image as a political sage. Kelly made it clear this wasn't leadership. It was theatrical grandstanding dressed in Armani. It wasn't civic responsibility. It was narcissism masquerading as activism, tailored perfectly for cocktail parties where everyone nodded in agreement and no one's ever stepped foot inside a Walmart. She likened Clooney's posturing to Hollywood's latest fad, celebrities playing revolutionaries without risking a thing. They're not on the front lines. They're tweeting from yachts and giving speeches at award shows, while the orchestra plays them off for being too self-righteous. By the end, you could almost feel sorry for George. Almost. Megyn didn't yell or rant. She calmly opened the door to reality and let Clooney stumble over his own contradictions. It was a quiet, surgical takedown, devastating and beautiful if you appreciate watching intellectual arrogance dismantled by icy facts delivered in a tone cold enough to chill groceries. Meanwhile, probably behind $1 million espresso machine, Clooney blinked at the backlash, clueless that Kelly had just turned his political dreams into a cautionary tale for any actor who mistakes applause for wisdom. As she put it, "I was raised to be honest, not full of BS." So here we have Clooney, the would-be philosopher king, adrift on a sea of self-importance, paddling with a golden oar, baffled as to how his carefully crafted image became the punchline for two people who've never even set foot on a red carpet. It's like he tried to play chess against a guy wielding a sledgehammer and a woman armed with a legal brief, and somehow thought he stood a chance. But this isn't just about Clooney. No, it's a symptom of a larger problem plaguing Hollywood, the dangerous illusion that fame is a shortcut to credibility. Celebrities assume that because they're adored on screen, they must be enlightened off it. That applause for their acting somehow translates into agreement with their opinions. Gutfeld and Kelly didn't just roast Clooney. They took aim at the endless cycle of awards shows where millionaires pat themselves on the back for pretending to understand the struggles of everyday people. What Clooney walked into was a trap of his own making. Expecting respect, he got annihilated. And in the aftermath, the message was clear. America is done, not just tired of celebrity sermons, but fed up with the assumption that the elite always knows best. Clooney became the living symbol of everything people roll their eyes at: luxury, lectures, and limousine liberalism. Gutfeld and Kelly didn't have to yell or call for boycotts. They used something far more powerful: sharp wit, unshakable logic, and uncanny ability to spot when someone's full of it. Clooney brought the spotlight. They held up a mirror, so next time a celebrity climbs on stage to tell America how to think, they better look both ways. Because Greg Gutfeld might be waiting with a killer punchline, and Megyn Kelly lurking with a closing argument that ends with, "And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why we don't take policy advice from a man who once wrestled a CGI goat." Roll credits. But not the Hollywood kind, the real kind, where everyday people finally get the last laugh.